When people find out what I do for a living, the very first question they ask is, so who's your favorite interview? And truth be told, after 30 years of doing radio and TV, beyond a couple of presidents and a handful of authors and artists and an actor or two, I don't remember much of my interviews. They just wash right over me. I can't remember any of them. They just go by a blur. So you can imagine how surprised I was, shocked really, when one of those people, one out of the thousands that I've interviewed, wound up touching my heart and left an indelible mark on my heart. Not only that, but he changed the way I work and how I live. And the lessons he taught me apply to you too. My teacher was Bruce Kramer. I met Bruce in the spring of 2011, about 5 months after he was diagnosed with ALS. It's also called Lou Gehrig's disease. Bruce was 55 years old when a doctor told him that he was going to die much sooner than he had ever anticipated, and from a horrible disease. ALS is awful. It sucks the life out of a body's muscles, leaves them useless, limp. All the muscles, the ones that you use to walk, to the ones you use to talk, swallow, and ultimately breathe. There is no cure for ALS. There's not even a decent treatment for it. So you can imagine the shock of hearing you have ALS. For that matter, you have cancer or you have Alzheimer's disease. The effect's the same. A terminal diagnosis just blows up the life that you once knew. To give you an idea of what an impact it had on Bruce's life, know that his pre-ALS life was pretty perfect, really. He was an excellent athlete. He was in prime physical condition. He had a very successful career as a college dean. He was a respected educator. He was a wonderful musician. He was a church choir director. He was a world traveler and a gourmet chef. Bruce was a real Renaissance man. And then ALS hit, and it splashed all over Bruce, his family, and his friends. Now, through a series of events, Bruce wound up in my radio studio where I thought I was going to do a quick interview with a guy who was blogging beautifully, I might add, about his life with a terminal illness. But I wasn't really sure if this is what I wanted to do. We were thinking about, it was possible that we could, perhaps if it went well, that first interview, do a series with Bruce of following his journey with ALS. But an editor was a little bit squeamish about that idea, saying that talking about death at 7 o'clock in the morning on the radio wasn't really good breakfast programming material. Death is not a good day brightener. And I can see that, I saw that point. And again, I wasn't too sure if we wanted to do this because really what was going on in my life at that time that I told no one about was Bruce's story was a little bit too close for comfort. At that time, I was dealing with my father's declining health and my marriage was imploding. And I didn't tell anyone about those two things. I kept those pretty hidden. So, because it is broadcast and the show must go on, I decided to do the interview, put the reservations aside. And an amazing thing happened. After that first 2-hour interview, Bruce and I kept talking on and off the air until his death on March 23rd of 2015, almost 4 years. And what started out to be just an ordinary interview turned out to be an extraordinary friendship. I decided I would title this talk, kind of a nifty little title here, Prescriptions for Living, Take as Directed from the Dying. And when the big D is brought up, everyone kind of freaks out, death. No one wants to go ahead and talk about death. Death and dying scare the life out of us. We don't like to be reminded that our time here is short. That's why I propose we start thinking now about how we want to live our lives from now until we die. Bruce Kramer thought a lot about this. In his blog, The Dis-Ease Diary, he wrote really quite eloquently about this. and this was shortly after he was diagnosed, he said, "Out of the emptiness that was once the surety of my life came the question, what will you be from here into eternity?" And Bruce had a choice about how he wanted to be with ALS. He could have been stuck in that position, bitter, angry, he could have been in denial, but he decided to move through all of that and live with his disease. He made the choice that he was going to live until he couldn't. He decided to embrace his impending death, his words, and he did it with grace and humor and elegance, if that could be believed, if one could be elegant with a disease like that. One of the wondrous things about Bruce Kramer is that he would entertain any question that you threw at him. He was more than willing to be honest and truthful about what was going on, and we never knew where our conversations were going to lead or end. So one day I said to him, "I'm curious, Bruce, tell me, can you have hope if you have a terminal illness? I mean, what do you hope for? Do you hope that the medication that you're taking somehow staves off the disease?" because he was in 2 drug trials. "Do you hope that there's going to be some sort of a development when it comes to ALS research that can help you? Do you hope for a good death? What do you hope for?" And he said, "I don't believe in hope. I believe in possibility." And I thought, what? I said, "You're kidding me. How could you not believe in hope?" I mean, hope, it actually is such a human emotion. I mean, we have to believe in something. We have to believe there's something better than this that's out there, and you're telling me you don't believe in hope. And he said, "You know, I think hope is a lovely concept. It's a beautiful concept, but it's kind of squishy," he said, "because it's a future kind of dream. It's a future request." And here's what he said by that. He said, you say to yourself, "I hope that it's not going to rain today. I hope it's not going to rain. I hope that she loves me. I hope I get that job." I mean, it's a future-looking request, in other words. And he said, possibility for me, because I don't have hope, because there's no cure for ALS, I look at possibility. I find that there's growth in possibility. What can I do now is what Bruce looked at. He thought that there was possibility getting out of bed in the morning. If you could get out of bed, even though you were in pain and you were suffering, he thought if you could get out of bed, that offered possibility. That offered growth. What could you do now versus something that was in the future? And the future looked pretty bleak to Bruce. So Bruce was interesting because he understood that in order to move forward into a life with a disease that was going to kill him ultimately, in order to have some peace in that life, he was going to have to accept what was happening to him and also forgive his body instead of attacking it. And don't get me wrong, when he was diagnosed, Bruce was shocked that his well-tuned body had pretty much betrayed him. And so he decided to forgive his body and to find healing. And he did this in a very interesting way. A lot of Bruce's healing happened in an adaptive yoga class taught by Matthew Sanford in the Twin Cities. It's ironic that Bruce found yoga at that stage of his life because the able-bodied Bruce scoffed at yoga. This is the guy who would lift weights and he would ride his bike 100 miles just for the fun of it. And he would scoff at yoga and say that it was for his wife, it wasn't for him. So there he was, ending up in an adaptive yoga class, confined to a wheelchair. And he discovered, though, that even when he was in a wheelchair, he found himself, he expanded into the space around him through careful breathing and in the poses that you have the volunteers putting you in. His hands, his arms, his feet, his legs were put into various poses by volunteers. And he described the feeling of awareness in his paralyzed body that transcended those physical losses he was experiencing. In other words, he said he felt alive in a dying body. And all of this, this discovery that Bruce made, led him to say that he felt that a diseased life is still a worthwhile life. And when I say diseased, I'm talking about illness, disability, the physical. But Bruce kind of took that in a different way. He talked about the concept of dis-ease, and that's why he called his blog the Dis-ease Diary. Dis-ease, Bruce felt, is a universal experience. It goes beyond the physical and includes anything that it causes unease, discomfort, emotional pain and suffering, or fear in our lives. It's the failed marriage, it's the lost job, it's the financial crisis, it's the sting of racism, it's the despair of loneliness. It's that stuff that we have that we carry with us and we push down. Bruce called that dis-ease. You may not have a disease, but I guarantee you that you are living right now with a dis-ease. Either you don't know it or you are avoiding it. You avoid your dis-ease, Bruce said, by drugging or drinking, overspending, overeating, having an affair, being overly busy, controlling, those sorts of behaviors. They mask our underlying dis-ease. And Bruce thought that by accepting our dis-ease, it would lead to a more authentic life, more authentic connection with other humans. When we recognize the dis-ease in someone else, Bruce said, it nurtures compassion. We can be gentler with one another. Now, it said, of course, that Bruce was more than willing to entertain almost any question that I threw at him. And a couple of months before he died, I jokingly asked Bruce, I was standing at the kitchen sink, and I said, "Say, have you figured out what life is all about yet?" And he said, "I think I have. Thank you for asking." He said, "I think the Beatles got it right. All you need is love." And I laughed, and he explained. He has been thinking a lot about this, he said, and he said, life is all about love, learning how to love and be loved. That's what he thought life was all about. And I remember thinking at the time as I stood at the kitchen sink, that seems kind of simplistic to me. I thought he would say life is all about doing good and trying to change the world and being kind to one another and, I don't know, saving the rainforest. I didn't expect him to say love in that respect, that life was all about love. And he said that psychologists kind of agree with Bruce that there is a basic human need to connect with other humans, and this need to love and be loved and feel connection is the essence of being human. And so I thought about that and just kind of ignored it until the morning of March 23rd of 2015. And I was sitting at the foot of Bruce's bed, and he was taking his last breaths in this world. And I remember standing there and thinking to myself, oh, now I get it. As I watched him take those last breaths, he was surrounded by a small group of friends and family. And Bruce was enveloped, he was embraced, and then he was held up high on pure love. And it was beautiful to see. And as I stood there in my sadness, I thought, oh, I understand, Bruce, you're right. It's all about love. Because, of course, what you take with you from this world is nothing really but love itself. So this is what Bruce Kramer said about love. And this is from one of our final conversations that you heard on the radio.
As I approach the last months of my life, what really has the deepest meaning of all is the love that I share with my family, my friends, my granddaughter. These are things that, in many ways, without them, my life would be meaningless. So I think if I were to be able to wave a magic wand, I wouldn't ask people to do things the way I'm doing them. But what I would do is ask people to examine their own lives and ask themselves the question you asked me: what really gives you a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose? And I think most of us, when we are honest and truthful about that, we would turn to things that impending death really focuses. I can't stress enough, this feels like loss, and it feels like sorrow, and it is, but it's also great joy. In a lot of ways, it's like fireworks. You know, you shoot the rocket into the air, and you anticipate, and then boom, it's this beautiful sparkle, and then it's gone. And I think that's what focusing on your death and how it focuses your life, it's a lot like that.
Yeah. So I want you to think about this. I want you to think how you want to live your life right now. What gives you life right now? What do you want to do? Seize that. Don't wait. What are you waiting for? That's what Bruce used to say. What are you waiting for? Time is definitely passing. It's your opportunity, it's our opportunity right now to live as fully as we possibly can. And my friend Bruce said, that's the way I want to die. I want to die fully alive. And I can tell you, just as sure as I'm standing here in front of you, that that's exactly the way Bruce Kramer died. He died fully alive. And so my wish for you, and of course if Bruce were here, he would tell you the same thing, Bruce's wish for you too, is to live each day of your life. And I thank you.